Hello! Welcome to another exciting episode of Web Development with Dr. J. In this series, we're going to build several responsive HTML and CSS examples that will teach flexible layout design for modern screens, ranging from phones to tablets to desktops. We'll focus on using Flexbox, Grid, fluid units, and media queries to create mobile-first layouts that adapt smoothly. Along the way, we're also going to build some good accessibility habits, such as semantic HTML and screen reader-friendly labels. We'll also look at accessibility specifically related to assistive technology that are used by people with vision impairments in particular. So what is responsive web design? So RWD, or responsive web design, is just a design approach that ensures that websites look and work well on all screen sizes. So how do we accomplish the goal of adapting to all these different screen sizes? So rather, again, than building these separate layouts for different devices, we'll use flexible layouts, images, and CSS media queries to let the design adapt automatically to the user's screen. So what are the key principles of responsive web design? Well, you've got mobile first. That's a common technique used. It doesn't mean it's the only way to do responsive web design, but it's very, very common to do mobile first. A lot of people traditionally have done desktop first because that was the predominant device, but now because of the mobile revolution, mobile development and mobile screen sizes are much, much more common. In fact, there are more mobile devices now than there are desktop devices. So we start with a simple layout that works well on small screens, and then we enhance it with media queries for larger screens. We'll learn about what media queries are a little bit later. So flexible layouts mean that we use relative units like percentages, EM or EMs, or FR instead of fixed pixels to make the content stretch or shrink naturally. What are media queries? We'll talk about those as well. So those are just special CSS rules that apply only when certain conditions are met, like the screen width. So if your screen is this size, apply these styles, otherwise you ignore it. Okay? So responsive images are another key principle of responsive web development. So images should scale with their container, for example, like max width 100%, so they don't overflow or distort. And also content priority. So we prioritize the most important content first, especially for mobile users who scroll more and click less. Now, where do Flexbox and Grid fit in? So you heard me mention Flexboxes and Grids before. Modern responsive web design relies heavily on the CSS Flexbox and CSS Grid, or Grid layout. So these are two powerful layout systems that help you build flexible, adaptable page structures. So what are Flexboxes? Well, the Flexboxes, which we'll see, are one-dimensional layouts. So they basically have rows or columns, and that makes it easy to stack or align elements vertically on small screens and horizontally on larger ones. Grid are two-dimensional, of course. So that means that we can arrange the space in rows and columns. It's ideal for building complex responsive layouts that adjust the number of columns or structure at different screen sizes. Both Flexbox and the Grid work beautifully with media queries, letting us switch layouts based on the screen width. So what are some example use cases? Well, with Flexbox, you might create a mobile layout where the content has to stack vertically, and then you switch to a horizontal layout for desktop because you have more what we call screen real estate. We have more screen basically to work with, so you might want to take advantage of some of that with horizontal. With Grid, you could make auto-fit cards or images into columns that adjust based on the available space. So you can use auto-fit and minmax functions. So what does it matter? Well, responsive web design improves usability on all devices. That means the ability of the users to use your website on their device. It eliminates the need to zoom in or scroll side to side on these sites, and it helps the sites look professional and modern, boosts accessibility and SEO, and future-proofs your design for new devices. Now, accessibility is another thing we're going to talk about. even though this module focuses primarily on responsive design, it's equally important to make sure that the sites we create are accessible by everyone. So including people who rely on screen readers, keyboard navigation, or assistive technology of different types. So to that end, many of our examples, especially example 6, will include basic accessibility best practices, such as using semantic HTML. So instead of just using divs everywhere, we use header, nav, main, and footer, which we've used already in our if you went through the CSS material we did before, and even the HTML. Specifically, I guess we started with the HTML lectures, tutorials. Associating the forms with label elements is another thing we can do to help these devices. And adding alt text for images, so that's very important. I mentioned that before. And incorporating what we call ARIA roles, okay, to enhance screen reader interaction. So those practices not only improve usability, they also improve your site's search engine optimization, or SEO, legal compliance, and overall inclusivity. It's a win-win. So I have been associated with organizations that I knew went through some very serious problems because their websites were not accessible. So they ended up, having to spend a tremendous amount of money trying to correct these issues when it could have been done early and not have been nearly major of a problem. So that was a legal compliance issue. So you definitely may end up working for a company, organization, government, entity where legal compliance is a very major thing, and making sure websites are accessible to everyone is also very important. So you should know at least some of this. So as you work in your web development or web design journey, remember that a website isn't truly well designed unless it works for everyone. So let's do example 1. So we're going to start with that. We'll do a responsive profile page. So that example is going to introduce the fundamentals of responsive layout, like Flexbox, fluid image sizing, and a mobile-first design. So the layout displays a profile image and personal details. On narrow screens like phones, the sections will stack vertically, and on larger screens like tablets and desktop, they will appear side by side. All right, so again, to save some time, we're going to create some folders. So I'll make a styles folder. I will make an images folder as well. For the images, I am going to import some images that I have available. Give me a moment. I'll drag them over here. So I've got them in another folder. I've got 5 images we'll use. So I'm just going to put them in there for now. So you've got flower close-up, Jane, mountain landscape, skyline night, and sunset. Okay, so those are my images that we'll use in different places here. And to save some time, I will do mostly copy-paste just so you can pause the video and then follow along, or copy it on your own, whichever you prefer. But I'm going to call this first one profile.html. And I'm going to make a corresponding, inside the styles folder, profile.css. In the HTML, I'll paste this, so you can see what we're doing here. Then I'll paste the CSS, and then we'll look at it and talk about it, okay? So the CSS is going to be more extensive than some of the stuff that we've done before in some ways, and we'll talk about the new stuff that's involved here. But don't worry, we will go over it. Okay, so the HTML is fairly straightforward, probably mostly what you expect. We are linking to a style here. We are definitely need that. That's like a fundamental. We have the viewport with the initial scale set to 1. That's to prevent the zooming and everything. We have a header set up inside the body. So that has Jane Student, Web Design Student at OCC. Then I have a main section here. Fairly straightforward. We have an image of Jane. So that's our photo of Jane Student. That's her name. Very convenient name for someone who's a student. Jane Student. I'm actually going to do that because that's silly. All right. So she just talks about how she enjoys making websites. There's a connect with me. So this has GitHub, LinkedIn. There's no actual links there. We're just putting kind of dummy links there for now. A copyright in the footer. It's fairly straightforward. Now, for profile.css, actually, in fact, let me do this real quick. I'm going to cut out the link here, save it, and then I'm going to show you the web page without the CSS applied. So if I open this with Live Server, very, very large image, obviously. We've got, I'm a student studying web design, blah, blah, blah. And it's not very interesting. And it's also kind of clunky and large and everything. So if I put this back, we might have to do something with the image, but we will see. I think it should be okay. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so this is with the CSS applied. So you've got GitHub and LinkedIn. If I make this a little bit smaller, you'll notice that when I get to a certain point, it stacks. Do you see that? So I go from here, right? Takes advantage of the horizontal space, and then when I get to a certain point, which would be closer to what would be on a cell phone, okay, a smartphone, you'll notice it stacks it vertically instead of horizontally. Okay, so it's responding based on the size of the browser. That's where the responsive comes in. So let's look at the CSS. So some of the CSS is pretty straightforward. We do the reset like we normally do. We set the body. Now here's the magic here. We are assuming by default that the device is mobile. Okay, that's what the mobile first design says. So we've got the line height and everything like that, assuming that it is mobile. So we've got the padding set up with 20 pixels. We've got a color for the text. And we've got a color for the background. It's like a kind of an off-white. We've got line height. We've got a header with a specific color in it as well, kind of like we did before. Some of these are going to look kind of similar just to keep things consistent. We'll do some more interesting stuff later in the course as well. If you're taking this course with me, say directly online and getting assessed and everything, you'll have other examples as well. But for this, some of this is kind of similar to what you've done before. You've got a header, an H1 inside of a header. So any of the H1s inside of the header have twice the size font and a 5-pixel margin border. You've got the profile, which if we look over here, the profile right here is this section called profile. This does have a div inside of it called details. We could make that another subsection or an article or whatever we want, but div is okay. Section, this profile is a class, okay, because of that dot right there in front of it. We're making this a flex, okay, so this is going to be a Flexbox. It's a column Flexbox, which we expect because on the mobile device, remember how it arranged everything in a column? That's what happened. So we have the column, we have gaps between the different cells. We've got the background is just straight up white. Padding is 20 pixels, border radius is 8 pixels, and we've got this box shadow to give it kind of a nice effect. We've got any image that occurs in the profile is 100%, 300 pixel width. So even though that was a really massive image that I actually have there, probably to deploy it, you would make the images smaller physically just so they don't take up as much room and don't take as long to load. But these are fairly straightforward images. Now, details. So in the details section, this has a text color of this kind of this, I don't know, cornflower blue or something. I'm not very good with the official names of these, but we can see that there's no red. It's got quite a bit of green and even more blue. So it's mostly blue, right? We've got details H3. This has kind of a, it looks like a greenish gray color, or gray color rather. So 333, that's a gray. We've got details section right here. Any unordered list that appears in there has the square type with 20 pixel padding. List items have 8 pixel margins. And then we've got the footer. Now, so most of this looks pretty straightforward. However, down here is what makes it responsive. This right here is called a media query. So, what this does is this is going to trigger a layout change for tablets and desktops. So it's, again, the default is mobile. So if you open this on a desktop, though, it'll apply these, but then it will override, it'll look for certain things that contradict what was defined up here, and it will use these instead. So in other words, what we're saying here, at media, and then in parentheses, see how it says min width is 768 pixels? So if the actual device or browser window, rather, that you're in has a minimum width of 768 pixels, okay, if it's lower than that, it will not trigger anything in this block. You'll notice that this media query thing, I just collapsed it right here, contains all of these three specific rule sets. So what do we have here? We've got the profile. Flex direction is row. So if it's desktop, it's going to take advantage of horizontal space. So we make the flex direction different from the default flex direction of profile up here, which was column. Okay, so we're changing it to row if it's desktop. We align the items with the flex start style. For the image, we set the shrink to 0. So we don't try to shrink the image any more than the default. And then we set margin right is 20 pixels. So for profile image up here, it keeps some of the stuff that we wanted. So the media queries only override the individual properties that are different. So the other ones that remain the same, it stays the same. The default of flex shrink is 1, which means if the flex container, the container that it's in, this particular image is in, is smaller than the total width of its items, the items will shrink to avoid overflow. But down here, we set it to 0. So we didn't set it explicitly in the mobile part because it was 1. That was the default. But setting it to 0 means the item will not shrink even if the container gets narrower. So it keeps its full width or height if the flex direction is column. So in this case, it's row, so it's going to be the width. And then we have details right here. The details enhances readability with padding and spaces for the UL. So right here, that's what we're doing there. But what we do down here, we set the flex grow property to 1. And what this does is this lets it expand to fill the space. So the flex grow basically controls how much a flex item should grow relative to its siblings when there's enough or when there's extra space in the flex container. Okay, so if there's leftover space, that item that's inside there will grow to take up some of that space. If multiple items have flex grow to 1, they share the space equally. So if there's 3 items, each of the 3 is going to take up that much space. All right, pretty cool. Let's go over here. I'm actually going to kind of hover over this briefly so you can pause the video if you need to copy some of this, although the code is available on GitHub. So just be aware of that. And then finally, the responsive layout. All right, pretty cool. You want to do another example? I do. I'm excited to do another example. So let's do the simple blog grid. So that example is going to demonstrate how to use CSS Grid. So we just use the Flexbox. Let's do something with Grid. So it's going to build a clean, responsive blog layout that automatically adapts to different screen widths. And it's perfect for showing off things like short articles or posts in a modern card style. So let's create a blog.html. And also we're going to have a blog.css. Okay, so blog.html. I'm going to copy and paste that from my notes, what we have here, and then we'll do the CSS, and then we will discuss it. So here is the CSS. So what's in the HTML? Let's look at it first, I guess. See what it does. So here we got these different cards, essentially, and when I make it smaller, it does respond and keeps it in sizes of 4. Here we've got it doing 3 and 1. We've got it 4. So each of these kind of adapts depending on the size here, but it's in more of a 2-dimensional manner rather than just going straight from a row to a column. So how does this work? Well, we've got the HTML set up. We've got the header again. We've got main, which we're calling the grid container. And each of these cards, essentially, those different segments you saw, are articles. So we've got blog card, blog card, blog card, blog card. They're each a blog card, and each of them just has different information in them. So we're using article semantic element to be the blog card. Well, what does that mean? Well, up here you've got pretty much pretty standard CSS for the most part. When we start seeing something that's important here, in particular for our purposes, is this main class is set to grid container. So grid container sets it to display grid with gaps of 20 pixels and sets grid template columns to repeat, autofit, minmax 250px 1fr. So what in the world does that mean? So again, the gap portion is basically just saying that the row and columns get a 20 pixel gap. So that's between all grid items. So there's really no need for margins on the children. Now, this one's a little bit more complicated right there. So that's really where the magic is. So the repeat basically tells it to repeat a grid column pattern. How many times depend on what's inside. The auto-fit part right here tells the browser to automatically fit as many columns as possible in the container without overflowing. So it wraps extra columns to the next row and collapses unused columns if there isn't enough space. So it's unlike autofill, which is going to preserve the structure. Now, what does the minimax or minmax 250 pixels 1fr mean? So that means each column is at least 250 pixels wide, and then the 1fr means it grows until it takes up one fraction of the remaining space. So in plain English, this means make as many 250 pixel wide columns as you can that stretch to fill the available space, but wrap to a new row if needed and leave no awkward gaps. Okay. So as an example, if the container, the grid container, is 1,000 pixels wide, for example, you'll get 4 columns of 250 pixels each. If it's 700 pixels wide, you'll get 2 columns. If it's 500, you'll get 2 columns that grow to 1fr. And then under 250 pixels, it'll stack in one column. So why is that really cool? So that's a mobile first design. It avoids media queries entirely in that part, and it makes the layout fluid, clean, and self-adjusting. We definitely do use grid with media queries. Those are absolutely used when we want more control than autofit and autofill can give us. So when we, what we have with the blog cards, that the background color is white, the padding is 20 pixels, the border radius is 6, so that makes the rounded edges like we've seen before, and we get a box shadow. So let's look at that again. So you can see this little tiny shadow, right? And they're white in the background against this kind of light gray background. You've got the dark gray in the header, but we don't need the media queries because when we, excuse me, 1 second, let me grab that. When we make it smaller, it's automatically putting it in the right positions that we need, or the right number per line to accommodate the specific size, right? All right, so the display grid on the grid container again makes it flexible. Grid layout. When we use the grid template, we're auto-adjusting columns based the count based on the available space. The gap adds space between the blog cards. What are other new things? We have the blog card with box shadow and radius makes it appear like there's depth. So that's one of the things we've done before. The H2. This is just highlighting the post titles. A hover, I believe we've got that in here somewhere. Sorry, we've got, the paragraph, of course, that's not anything new, really. The anchor has the no text decoration, makes it the color blue. When you hover over it, it changes the color of the link from this light blue to kind of a darker, I would say a little bit more, maybe a little bit different shade of bluish green color. And then, of course, we've got the footer at the bottom, which has gray. All right, pretty cool. Now, let's look at a third example. So we'll do a responsive image gallery. We did add some extra images besides our friend Jane here. We've got flower close-up, a mountain landscape, the skyline night, and a sunset. Okay. So that examples that we're going to do is going to create a clean responsive image gallery using Flexbox, Flex Wrap, fluid image sizing. So on small screen sizes, what's going to happen is the images will stack vertically, and on the larger screens, they wrap naturally into the rows. So let's create a gallery.html right there, and then we're going to create a gallery.css here. We'll copy over the code from the other screen. And then for the gallery.css, what we're going to do is copy over that as well. And we'll talk about this in a moment. In this case, we'll also see that we're not using the media queries in this case, because we're basically causing the primary container, the gallery, right here, which is our main here. It has the different figures inside of it, right, with fig caption and the images and then the fig caption inside of each. We're causing it, even using Flexbox, because it's using Flex Wrap, it will automatically go to the next line as needed. So we're not even using media queries in this case either. So this is just showing an alternative way to do this. So the gallery itself, the HTML, is not particularly complex. We'll see that when we see, if we look at this with Live Server, we're taking advantage of this horizontal space. We do have rounded edges and the image on top of that. You notice that the rounded, there is a rounded edge at the top, but it's very squared off at the bottom here for the image, but the card itself is rounded at the bottom. Now, if we start making this narrower, it is automatically taking advantage of vertical space. Okay, and in this case, when we get it really small, if it's on a mobile device, it's very narrow, it's going to actually cause it to have just one image at a time. You notice that when we expand it, we can take advantage of the horizontal space as well. So what is that doing? Or how are we doing that? So we got these figures here. The main class is the gallery. That's the container essentially. And then we've got each figure and each image. So how are we doing this? So we've got some pretty standard settings at the beginning with body styling. We've got the header set. The header has some border radius and padding on it as well. The gallery container is set to a flex layout with flex wrap, and it has the 20 pixel gap. Justify content center is causing the content to be centered inside of it. So the default for display flex is to use or flex wrap rather, is no wrap. That means that the Flexbox is only in one row, and it allows the items to shrink to avoid overflowing. Wrap allows the flex items to wrap onto new lines when there isn't enough horizontal space. So your image cards will overflow into multiple rows on smaller screens. Justify content is to, with the center, allows or controls the horizontal alignment of items along the main axis. So left to right, since we're dealing with rows, the gallery is set to row by default. So that means that the centers the image cards horizontally within each row. So for justify content, we're thinking, how should we arrange items across the row? That's different from align content, for example, and that would distribute the space between multiple rows if wrap created multiple lines, and it would go across the cross axis. So the main axis, the vertical is the cross axis when our main axis is row. If the main axis were column, the cross axis would be columns. Okay? Or, I'm sorry, the cross axis would be the rows when the main axis is columns. This, of course, styles the figure with a white background, border radius of 8, and the box shadow, of course. We have the text alignment set to center and overflow hidden. The overflow hidden is basically a property that's going to tell you, or going to say what happens when the content that's contained inside exceeds the size of the container. So it could hide anything that overflows the bounds content. Okay, so if a child inside the figure is larger than the given amount, it's going to be clipped. Any part that doesn't fit stays invisible, basically. All right. Pretty cool. So we know what the box shout and the border radius and all that fun stuff does. Let's move on to responsive pricing cards. Let's do that. So we're going to do pricing.html and pricing.css. Okay, we're going to do our HTML file and, of course, the pricing file. If I can grab it. There we go. Alrighty, here we go. With this one, we're back to using a media query in this particular instance. So if we look at this, just to give it a look, we can, of course, see what happens when we make this smaller, right? So it stacks it instead, right? Now, again, the HTML is fairly straightforward. We've got the unlimited website, 24-hour support, custom solutions, items within this card. We've got another card, and we've got another card. So there are 3 cards within the pricing container. So you'll notice with the grid patterns, the grid and the flex techniques, we are using a kind of a container that is set with the flex or grid in these cases. So in this case, it's flex, has a column direction for the flex direction. We've got the actual individual cards with the text centered. So it's pretty much what you expect here. The H2, the flex 1 means that they're going to take up, they're going to share space based on a 1-to-1 ratio, because there's 3 of them. Each of them takes up 1/3 approximately, assuming the padding and any other space that they need. The H2 card, or the H2 within the card rather. This has a font size that varies depending on the viewport width and size that it's in. We've got the margin bottom is 10. This has a blue as well. The price also has similar constraints. The unordered lists have no specific type within them, and that is to make sure that even though we have a list of things, they don't have bullets in front of them. So they're centered, but they don't have bullets in front of them. You've probably seen these types of cards before, to be honest. So this looks very well done. It's very professionally done. It looks organized. There's the pixel, the padding, and the margins between these created by the fact that they're taking up a specific amount of space within their container. So we've got the cards themselves. The buttons are actually anchors. So you'll see here we don't actually have a button type. We just have the anchor, and we styled it as a button. So it has an inline block. It has a specific amount of padding, blue color background, white text, has a border radius, text decoration, and they have a transition associated with them. So for example, if we go to here and we hover over, you'll notice that there's a transition between 2 colors. It gets a little bit darker. Might be hard to see on the video, but you'll see it when you look close. It goes from like a light blue to a dark blue, but it doesn't immediately change. It just kind of transitions. All right, so we've got that. The media right here, this is the responsive layout. So this is making the only thing that's changed here is that we set the pricing container for desktop and tablets so that it has a flex direction of row. So that means it's holding up or taking up as much space as possible in the row rather than the column direction. And the footer, of course, is fairly standard. The footer is fairly standard. You'll notice that the media query right here does only contains this pricing container here. It does not contain the footer. So this media query is just containing that pricing container. We could put the footer above. It doesn't really matter. Just letting you know. All right, so next up, let's look at a responsive nav bar. So I'm going to make navbar.html, and we're also going to do navbar.css. .css. Okay. So nav bar, we're going to make responsive navigation bar that adjusts layout based on the screen width. On the desktops and tablets, the nav is horizontal, and then on the mobile devices, it stacks vertically. So this helps. This will help you hopefully understand how to build the UI structure and adapt to different user contexts based on the screen. So this combined with the previous should help with that. But navigation is one of the areas where you see it quite frequently. Okay, we'll put this CSS in here, and we've got the nav bar. All right, let's look at this. So if we open it with the live server, it's got a horizontal menu here. If you're on a mobile device, meaning it's a lot smaller, you'll notice that it actually starts to stack. So when you get to a certain size right here, you'll notice that they have the transitions just like we had before. It looks very cool. Using a lot of blue with these. I like blue, but you'll notice that they stack. Okay, so this will make better use of a mobile screen. Whereas if you have a little bit more real estate, screen real estate, you can use the horizontal and they can go across like that. All right, so this is the nav class. So main nav is what we're calling it. Keeping the content separate in a main section. This is just kind of a basic section. And then you have the footer down here. So we have the header as well, but nav is kind of our new thing here. It has the 4 different links. And the main thing to pay attention to this, obviously most of this is fairly straightforward, but you'll see that it is remember that it's mobile first. So when we're talking about these without a media query, or if there are media queries, in which case there is here, but the rest of it's mobile first. So if it's not inside of a media query, it assumes mobile by default. So that's why the flex direction is set to column instead of row, because it assumes it's going to stack when it's a mobile size. Where that differs is down here. In the media query, we see the main nav has the flex direction set to row and justify content as center, and then this has its width set to auto for the anchors. All right, pretty cool. So we can move on to the last example in this particular section, since that one's pretty straightforward, I hope. So we'll work on an accessible contact form. So let's create a contact form.html, and the styles are contact form.css. All right, so let's get the font or the HTML, and we're going to now have the CSS copied over here as well. So you can always take a minute to look at this. Pretty standard heading on this. We're connecting to the contact form there. We have a header. We have a main section. Notice this has field set. So that is also a semantic HTML element, which is specifically used in forms. So it's used to group related form controls together, like checkboxes, inputs, or dropdowns. That helps with accessibility using the field set. Also helps with visual organization as you style it and things like that. Now, other things that you might notice that are different, or maybe that we should accentuate here, are labels. So we have used them before. Those are associating this text with that form, so that helps with screen readers, so it knows they're associated. Another thing are these things like this ARIA required, ARIA live. These are communicating required fields to assistive technology. They allow the screen readers to announce status messages dynamically. That's when we have things like roles, the ARIA role, which we see down here. Okay, so if there's a status message there, it will have a polite voice, and then the role is alert. Okay, so right down over here in the contact form, we see most of the pretty standard stuff that we've been dealing with all this time. Labels. We do have the input types here: text, email, and text area. So for visual, accentuation, let's look over here. There we go. So there's the contact form. And you'll notice this one pretty much stays the same. It just gets wider and larger as needed. But to us who are just using it directly, this all looks pretty much the same. It's not going to really have an impact on you, but if you're using a screen reader, something like the ARIA roles and things like that can make a huge difference. So this is an accessible form and includes the labels, required indicators, and proper grouping. Required indicators are good for everyone, because if you try to hit, submit it rather, if I try to do it, okay, we'll say send message. Without that, it'll say please fill out this field. That also works with accessibility as well. But you'll notice that even if I fill that in, you might have email down here. If I don't do that, it'll say, hey, you need that, etc., etc. So it'll force you to fill stuff out without having to use JavaScript. So a lot of this stuff takes some of the burden off of, at least to an extent, without dismissing the need for doing stuff on the back end. This does take some of the burden off JavaScript on the front end, which is nice. The ARIA attributes. So ARIA, in case you're wondering, it stands for the Accessible Rich Internet Applications. It's just the set of these special HTML attributes that will help make dynamic web content and custom UI components accessible to people who use screen readers. Okay, so it's actually part of the Web Accessibility Initiative of the W3C. So there's ARIA label, ARIA hidden as true. That'll hide elements from screen readers so they don't have to read them out or even consider them if it's not important for a screen reader. Role alert will tell assistive tech to immediately announce a message. Polite, live polite means that we announce the content updates without interrupting the user. Okay, so you can call that polite voice. So it'll announce it, but it's not going to interrupt the user. Role dialog that identifies a modal or pop-up window as well. So as a general rule, though, it's good to use the native semantic HTML elements first before depending on ARIA stuff. So there's no built-in semantic equivalent. If there's no built-in semantic equivalent, using the ARIA is better. Or you're building custom interactive widgets, it's a good idea to use ARIA as well. But a lot of the semantic stuff, like field set and using headers and main and all that stuff, is already moving in the direction of not only being more organized, but also being more accessible for your users that need it. Okay, so there's a whole lot more that we could cover, but this is just giving you a taste of both responsive web design and also a little bit of a taste of accessibility. Okay, so you might be wondering, well, why do we have an empty paragraph here with polite attached to it? So using the polite non-interruptive, I'm calling it a voice, but it's basically just saying wait until it's convenient for the screen reader. It's not that urgent, so wait for the screen reader to finish what it's doing. So it still requires content in order to actually trigger an announcement. So right here, this is empty, but it has an ID. We haven't talked about JavaScript or how to use that or other techniques to fill this with data, and we're not actually putting data in it right now. But let's say you do something and then it fills with data, like it says something like message sent successfully or something like that. It will use polite voice once the announcement is actually needed and the screen reader is done with all its other stuff. So if this has content, it will be read in a screen reader when it is given content. So in the JavaScript, if you set the text content property to message sent successfully, that content update will trigger the screen reader to announce it if the role in the live region are configured correctly. All right, now role alert generally means immediately if there's critical info. So in reality, we probably want to only use one of these. So if we want it to stay polite, we probably are going to keep it as just ARIA live. And if we want it to immediately alert them, if it's super important, we can take off the ARIA and just use the role. Okay, you don't really need both of them at once. So, but you would use JavaScript on one or the other. Okay, so we probably want to put maybe a note there. Use only only one in most cases. Okay. Probably should put what we're talking about. Role equals alert, or ARIA live equals polite. Well, I'm not even going to say most. I'm just going to say only use one at a time. Now, I believe role is going to take the priority if you do use both, but really you should only use one. All right, that's pretty much what I've got for you this time. Hope that was useful. I will see you in another lecture. Bye-bye.